Hello and welcome back to On the Mic with Mike. I am Mike Jarvis, and in this edition of On the Mic with Mike, my guest is none other than the one and only Mr. Dunstan Lindesay. Welcome to the program, Dunstan.
A hearty hello to Monstrations, wherever you are, diaspora, back home, welcome.
And Dunstan, it's fantastic having you here with me. Just a bit of background, Mr. Lindesay, we all know him as Dunstan, the conscience, and studied political science at Boston University. I think I can safely describe you as a social and political commentator in a Montserrat context, and even broader than that, very, very, very witty. At one point, Dunstan, I said, I'm going to describe Dunstan in the context and category right up there with, in a Socrates sense, as a sort of a socio-political gadfly. And for anyone who might have any doubts about gadfly, what kind of fly is that? You know, well, it, Socrates referred to himself as a gadfly, the type of person who will challenge what was perceived to be back then as the intellectual norm or as the norms of society, the powers that be, the rule makers, and highlight flaws in the system, was at one point considered quite annoying. We know what happened, but not in this case with Mr. Lindesay. So, Dunstan, you know the topic. We are discussing the issue of diaspora voting as that pertains to Montserratians, particularly, obviously, Montserratians in the diaspora. Straight out of the bat, where do you stand on this?
Well, I'm against it. And one of the reasons that I'm against it is I always say with politics, everything is about numbers. If you're going to build a school, it's going to be the cost against, the number of children. If you're going to do a port, numbers is always important. And the Montserrat we have today, 2024, we have more Monstratians living outside of Montserrat than inside of Montserrat. And if we say, come and vote, and especially, these days, not from Antigua to Montserrat, but from New York to Antigua, from London to Antigua, we have cheap tickets. I mean, enough people can come down to actually decide the outcome of the election. Then they jump on planes, go back to wherever they work or live, and they leave us with a set of people that we that live there are going to have to look at for the next 5 years. And although a lot of people in the diaspora are tuned in to what's going on back home, they get some secondhand information here and there. And I would say you have to live there to understand the place. So for that reason, I'm not for voting by the majority or everybody in the diaspora. I can compromise and come up with I make one suggestion. Today I was actually thinking about something, and I said, we have some people who are invested in Montserrat. They might have a property, or they might just love Montserrat. And some of them come to Montserrat every year. So if we're going to set a criteria to let people vote in Montserrat, we can have somebody that maybe that trip that they make to vote is the only trip that they made in 5 years. So maybe that we can, say, for instance, if somebody comes to Montserrat every year, that might be one of the qualifications to be allowed to vote. Maintaining a property of a certain value, I'm for that. And several other things. I mean, I would like to see an open, honest discussion on this subject, because we really need to incorporate the diaspora in the affairs of Montserrat, because we have done it the other way, and after 25 years, we're nowhere. So we have to do it differently going forward. But I'm not for just saying anyone who wills, come and vote. No.
Well, you've stated it very clearly and very eloquently. And I like the fact that you have put qualifications on the qualifications, meaning you're saying, let's have an open and honest discussion. Let's talk about criteria. You mentioned the term property, which is one of the terms that comes up regularly since I've started this thing, and even in prior conversations. Property, the definition of property. You spoke about property of a certain value. So I'm getting the impression that you are quite open to have a system in place, an acceptable, workable system in place, but not a blanket, throw open the doors wide open, and the greater majority of people, Montserratians in the diaspora, can just turn up one day, vote, turn around, and leave. And that would have been their only contact with the island. Am I interpreting you correctly?
Totally, totally correct. Because we're not the United States. There is 150 million people voting in the United States. If 1 million people actually come in, they can't decide the outcome. We have about, say, if we have 1,400 voters, 1,500 voters, because in Montserrat, the actual voting list is, totally, nonsense, because I've seen people on it who have been dead 4 years. But the actual number of people there to vote might be 1,400, 1,500. Like I said, at any time, 1,500 people can waltz into Montserrat. I mean, we have St. Patrick's Festival, we have Christmas Festival. Maybe they'll invent an election festival. And they'll drop in.
You got me with that one. That's a thought, an election festival.
Right. And, like I said, I mean, the upbeat, I mean, the little uptick in the economy would be good. But when they pack up and go, we hit rock bottom. But the difference between St. Patrick's, I mean, you have a bar, you make some money, you should save some, then it goes back down. But what they would leave this time is 9 people who maybe the locals would not have voted for in their worst, if they were stone drunk. So I'm not for that. I prefer, like I said, there has to be a certain criteria, and people have to, kind of qualify. It's not just like, well, I was born there, so that's my right.
Okay,
No.
well, let's explore that a bit further, because that is very, very important. What sort of system are you thinking about that you think might just be workable and might be acceptable to both Montserratians in the diaspora, as well as the Montserratians and other voters, qualifying voters, who are resident in Montserrat?
Well, I mean, I've heard before about maybe a system where people in the diaspora could maybe vote for 2 additional representatives. So these people would be, maybe in charge of what we'd call diasporan affairs, and they would have maybe not so defined role in the local, in the affairs that affect the local population, but they could liaise with the diaspora and come back and say, for instance, because every time we see these town hall meetings, or the premier goes to London and they go in some hall there and he's there with the deputy premier, and the whole thing looks so silly and shabby, and I mean, it would be better to have maybe a representative who can go around and meet the people. Because what I would say about these town hall meetings, Mike, how England is, London is. if you have a job and you're working 9 to 5 and you finish at 5, there is no way that you're going to be going to no town hall meeting at 7 o'clock when you're fighting on the underground to get home.
Correct.
So a lot of people would just be bad unintentionally, yes. And sometimes the people that show up at these town hall meetings and talk are like the ones that I said have never been in Montserrat in the last 10 years. Because some of them don't have jobs and they have the time. So we have to we need to develop a better system. So maybe some representatives or people that are specifically to represent the diaspora might be a start. Because, we have a lot of people who sometimes their interest might be, what's the concession on me buying a property and developing that property? I remember back, when Ruben then were there before 2014, they used to have a lot of SROs that cover construction for people living overseas, and you could come back and you could get duty-free or certain things. A lot of them have lapsed and they didn't renew them. And a lot of people have been asking about these kind of things. And a diaspora representative would get the data and come back now to their colleagues in Parliament and say, this is what I've found, that there are 60 people, and I believe from my observation or my conclusion is like about 30 of them are actually serious. And if you can tailor a SRO, we might have a little jump there in the construction and different things. You know what I mean? A lot of people sometimes want to know about the return in monstration scheme, and there's a lot of things where people in the diaspora need information about Montserrat.
So then that would be like a portfolio for that elected diaspora representative.
Yes.
Are you then suggesting that that person would only be voted for by the diaspora, or should or shouldn't the resident Montserratians also vote for that person? Because there would be an interaction in that role, with that portfolio.
Definitely, because I'm saying that if the diaspora residents are going to be allowed to vote for the other representatives, it has to be equal. So they would also campaign as everybody else, but their role would be specifically tailored to the affairs of people living in the diaspora and how they interact. Because another thing which I would like to see is the people. I've heard people talk about it. I don't think anyone has done anything about it. Is to find out what skills and stuff and what businesses and stuff our people own and possess in the big cities. And if we're sourcing, like for instance, like with procurement and stuff, if we're sourcing something and we have a monstration someplace that has a similar type business, maybe they can be very useful to their country of birth in that regard. And then again, if we're looking for someone to do a job in Montserrat, maybe a year or two, we might have a monstration someplace who can come and fill that gap. So, like I said, a representative that deals with the diaspora could be very, very important for Montserrat going forward.
So then sorry, Dunstan, continue.
No, you go.
Okay, good. So I'm just expanding on that. So that individual then would be politically appointed, quote unquote, by being elected. So there is a matter of political accountability to the voters, not just an appointed person as an appointed civil servant having that job, because that role would also be international in nature. It won't only be that elected diaspora representative relating to just the Montserratians living in the United Kingdom. They must also relate to the Montserratians living in Canada, in the United States, in the rest of the Caribbean.
And also,
Is that a one-person
and
job, or should it
no,
more
no,
than one?
it definitely would not be a one person job because, like I said, we actually have more Montrealers living in the diaspora than in Montserrat. So, I mean, if we have nine people falling over each other in Montserrat, we might probably need, half a dozen to do the job. And cause remember, sometimes though they might have to liaise with local governments and stuff because, like I was saying about say we need someone with a skill to come to Montserrat and work for 2 years. Maybe that diaspora representative could approach the company that they work for, or maybe they work for a local authority in England, and make, like you say, like they say in Montreal, make the case. Say, we're a poor country and we need this person to come to Montserrat and help out the land of their birth for 2 years. And could you second them? Could you hold their job till they get back? Because someone might not want to leave their job in New York City to go to Montserrat on a 2-year contract, and then they have nothing to go back to, and the job in Montserrat might not be permanent. So there's a lot of areas which we can work on, and it can, like I said, everything is linked. Everything is linked, and everything in politics come back to numbers because we have to find out how many people we have, how many people are really interested in because a lot of the people that are maybe babbling about they should vote, they would never come to vote. So sometimes I think that people get a little nervous because you hear a lot of chatter. Because I went away at about 15 years old. And until I came back to Montserrat, I used to go to Montserrat a lot because I had my family there and I'm a family person. And I was in and out of Montserrat all the time, sometimes 2, 3 times a year. But I never made no fuss about voting in Montserrat until 2014 when I lived there from 2010. So I think a lot of people who are overseas and working and trying to get to a point that they can get back to Montserrat, like I did, that I can get back and be what I want to be there. I can be there regardless of what happens. That they're not making no fuss about, I should vote or whatever. They got better things to do. But on the not I'm saying that better things to do than thinking about Montserrat, but better things to do than thinking about that going down to vote once every 5 years or something like that. Because I can tell you, Mike, I we all back who we back and we talk, but I've never thought when I was living in Boston and when I came to London, I've never thought about running down to vote for nobody because I didn't live there. I was more interested in supporting the Conservatives or my Republican Party when I lived in Boston or London. I never ever thought about going down to Montserrat to vote for it. But after I lived in Montserrat, then I became, wrapped up into the politics because this is where I live.
Yeah. What do you
So
think has driven this change, this renewed interest or this surge of interest? How much of that would you say is linked to the volcano, Montserratians having to relocate? That's going to take us down the road into this discussion of domicile by origin and domicile by choice. But how much of what we are having now, this debate, this issue, do you think is driven by the volcano, relocation, refugee status, and is a valid concern?
Well, I mean, the volcano was a different, different, monster, different three-headed monster there, because before, people that went away were, it was more by choice, or if I went away at 15, that would be my family's going, I go. But before, with the volcano, we had people leaving not by choice. That some people had to go, because if you were from one of the villages that were destroyed and you came to the north, and you didn't have money to buy land, and they were slow with housing and stuff, and you took that, you went away, but maybe you went away reluctantly. So it would your heart would always be more closer, or more tied, or more drawn to Montserrat, because of how you left. Because someone in Montserrat right now who, maybe things are bad with them, and they come down to a point that they say, I can't make it here, I have to go. And they go to London. They might be least likely to be thinking about Montserrat in a positive light for a little while, because they want to get themselves together first. But I think some of the middle-aged people that went there because, like I said, they went reluctantly, and the housing and stuff had a lot to do with it. That because it's not easy to, I can't imagine what someone who worked 45, 50 years and built up their little property in one of those villages in the east or southern part of the island, and have to just turn your back on it and come north. You can't even bring maybe your personal items from inside because you don't have the place to put them. I can't imagine, that's trauma. And I think that those people, that when they went away, that the closure was never there. So that they would always be thinking about Montserrat, and they would maybe want to understand that you're not supposed to tell me I can't vote there. I mean, some of them, like I said, they're not going to even maybe exercise the right to vote, but they would like to know that they have it, or they believe that they should have it, because I am Montserratian. I was born in Montserrat, and that some of them think is enough.
So then the compromise that you spoke about earlier on, would what you just mentioned there factor into that? There's still the passion, there's still the connection, there's still the connection mentally, there's still also a connection practically, because there are people who send remittances, might have property, however we choose to define property, or have situations in Montserrat that even with remaining relatives, that any decision of any locally elected government that local elected government makes would impact on their relatives, and as a result of that, the folks in the diaspora might have to, make some special arrangements, financial or otherwise, to support their relatives back home, either financially or in some other way. So I'm just thinking that when we speak about living in Montserrat and only being affected by decisions made by the government there, in a sense that those decisions could have implications and repercussions even within the diaspora.
Very
What do you
true,
think?
because I was thinking about even the other day, or what was going on the other day with access. Because I mean, imagine that
Yeah.
you are in London and you want to get to Montserrat, or you were or worse, you were in Montserrat and you have your job to come back to, and they're telling you there's no way you can get up to Antigua. So yes, indeed, the government, the actions of the government, or decisions of the local government, does impact people in the wider diaspora, because once you have not, you know, cut or burnt that bridge, you are part of, it's just like you just, like Dr. Buffon says, you just work in another, or you commute to work. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You work overseas because the things are bad in Montserrat, but really, if you had your choice, a lot of people would fit that bill. If they had their choice, they would be in Montserrat.
Yeah, so that sort of segues us into another area. That is this whole thing about the voter eligibility process in Montserrat, the 36-month residency requirement, and how do we calculate that 36 month? Are we talking about a straight period of 3 years, or 3 years accumulated over a 5-year period, or whatever? The definition of domicile, the definition of residence. Uh, so, in looking at, back to your point of compromise, how do we then take this forward? Because you've thrown out some ideas there about, for example, an elected diaspora representative or two, which the way you explain it, I'm getting the impression that
But
that could be a portfolio that
I,
practically pays for itself
yes,
if it
very true.
encourages investment and people to come back home, that sort of thing. So are we now looking at?
But I would say this,
Okay,
Mike.
you go, Dunstan. You go.
When this 36-month thing always rankled me. Like I said, I never made a big deal about it because I had to do my thing, and I never said, well, okay, I need to go there to vote. But I don't know, like I said again, I don't know who came up with that 36-month thing and what inspired them, but I don't agree with it. My criteria would be, if someone came to Montserrat and spent 9 months of a year in Montserrat leading up to the election, I would that to me would tell me that they wanted to vote.
But then, are you looking at 9 unbroken months, or a compilation of periods that total 9 months?
If election is the 26th of November, and I go back to the 26th of November the previous year, and if you can show me that you were in Montserrat for 9 out of those 12 months, that would automatically qualify you to vote, in my opinion, because you're showing me that you want to be there to vote. That's how I see it. And if you come and you're doing a property or something, and you're in Montserrat, like I said, 9, maybe we could even bring it down to 8. So you're down there 2/3 of the year. That should count for something. Because I'm not. If we go back to the OECS, CARICOM nationals and stuff, I don't think that they should have a different qualification than someone who was originally born in Montserrat. I can't support that.
Well, someone would say to you, or myself in this case, would say, but if you look at the situation, the voter requirements in many, or practically all of the other Caribbean countries, what we have in Montserrat is quite liberal compared to the stringent requirements in some of the other Caribbean countries. Just had a conversation recently regarding Barbados, where there were Montserratians who were living in Barbados for 10, 15, I think in one case 20 years, and they did not have the right to vote in Barbados, a CARICOM country, and they had to take the government to court to get that. I think there's not with a court case, but I think there's a similar situation in the British Virgin Islands as well. So comparatively speaking, the Montserrat situation is it's very accommodating, to put it that way.
Well, I mean, like I said, I think that I don't know if it was because that they were doing all these things to try to keep the population at a certain level, but I don't think that it's you know, you don't discriminate against your born citizens. And they, if they, like you said, the criteria for OECS and CARICOM nationals is quite liberal, and maybe we could ease up on the qualifications for you know born Montserratians.
So what are we looking at here? We have an election coming up. Should
Well,
this be more of an issue in the election? It might not happen to enable any diaspora Montserratians to meet the eligibility requirements for this upcoming election. But are you suggesting, let me put it that way, are you then suggesting that this is something that we need to start working on now in time for in the next election coming up? Because this issue that we're discussing, and in all of the conversations I've had so far, keep on referring to a 2014 report by the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, which itself back then called for clarity on this issue and the interpretations of the current rules and regulations we have for voter eligibility.
but like I said, people have just, or all the governments have just tiptoed around it. I met it there. I'm not going to say nothing, that type of thing. So maybe it's time to have an open conversation about it, to find out and to find out the where the candidates who are running, where they stand on this issue. And then, going forward, you would see what the electorate decides, because there might be some in Montserrat, a lot of people living in Montserrat who are opposed to Montserratians coming back to vote. I wouldn't think that might be the case, because, like I said, I think that a lot of people, from me being around Montserrat, I think a lot of people feel that a Montserratian shouldn't have or shouldn't be given a tougher time to qualify to vote than someone from another island. So I think that's the consensus of the people that I've spoken to, and I've been there for 14 years. I've been there from 2010 until nearly 14. I've been there. I came last year. So I think that whatever the criteria is for CARICOM nationals, I think that a lot of people would like to see Montserratians in the diaspora, having nothing more difficult or the same criteria. So that is another thing that we have to maybe address it openly, because sometimes a lot of people hedge. You ask, most politicians would hedge. They would not give you a straight answer on anything. And I think it's time that people try to get, maybe something from each party. Where do you stand on this? Where do you stand on this? There's 4 of them, and they should be approached and asked publicly, what's your stand? Or what do you think Montserratians in the diaspora what should be the criteria for Montserratians in the diaspora to participate in local elections? And so where they stand. So I don't know who would decide to question. I don't know, Montserrat journalists are not.
Well, before you go there, let me just interject and say, from my perspective with these conversations that I'm having on this issue, I have approached all of the political leaders, and some candidates as well. I've had confirmation from one known political leader, let me put it that way, and well, I'm still waiting. And I've spoken to one political candidate so far, former political candidate, and I have another candidate scheduled to speak as well. So in time, one hopes that if not just me, but others will put the issue to them, or the political parties themselves will take the initiative and have a clear policy outline as to how they propose to deal with it. Even though he hasn't spoken with me, he hasn't responded, but I, I think this is probably the third time that I'm saying it. Mr. Paul Lewis did bring the issue up in the Legislative Assembly, and that triggered an unscheduled sort of impromptu debate on the issue. And I think in terms of the politicians who spoke, if I'm just to do a sort of a random recall survey in my head, I think it was probably 50-50 in terms of those who were committed, we need to do something about it, and those who were rather vague, suggesting, well, maybe this is a matter for the court. If you're speaking the Legislative Assembly, it is not a matter for the court. You
No, it
are the
shouldn't be. No.
lawmaker. And that's my perspective on it.
Yes, they should lead. The parliament should not wait for the courts to be brought in. They should lead on a lot of important issues. But like I said, I mean, my opinions are just my opinions, because I mean, I'm supporting a political party, but that
Well,
I
I'm
don't
not going to
know.
ask you which. I'm not going to ask you which one, because this is not the purpose of what we're doing here.
No, but you know that I'm clear with. I have no qualms about saying, my mind is like
Well, it's your right.
yeah,
it is your
yeah,
democratic right, and
yeah,
we are
yeah.
free
I
and
uh
open
I mean
democratic society,
I
free
I
speech, free association,
I
free
let the
thought.
chips fall where they may. And I mean, I've been sued so much for my opinions, my freedom of speech, that I'm not worried anymore, so
Well, you
I
haven't said anything here, and I certainly wouldn't would
no,
not have
no. I
you
mean,
do
I
anything. You've
I
been
I I I always you know give a little thumbs up to Justice Stanley John from Trinidad, and he told me in his chambers, "You're a good writer. Just be circumspect."
just be
And
circumspect.
just be circumspect. And since that, a lot of people sometimes have to call me to say, give me a little heads up there, because I've been circumspect.
Well, not only that, as I said at the outset, you are a student of political science. You know the academics of it. You know your way around it. You have your own witty way of putting things in on your social media page and your social media dialogue. So credit for that. I mean, I must thank you for being so frank and bringing your valuable insights to this conversation with me. I really do hope that the compromise that you spoke about, that someone takes it up and move forward with it, because
Yeah,
it is an issue that needs to
and
be
you see,
addressed.
the main thing, Mike, is they always say, let all ideas contest, and
Exactly.
then we can get, let more people talk, and then you can get a consensus on what is the best option going forward, because that is what we need. We need a lot of people to come and talk about this situation that we're having, and then going forward we can say, that's a good point, that's a good point. Well, no, we're not going to deal with that one. And then you come up with the best solution, because I think that just kicking the can down the road, as we've been doing for how many years now, is not going to work. It's probably about time now to address this elephant in the room, and we need to do it before the next 5-year cycle.
And shall I add to that, we need to do it before someone else does it for us.
And then we're going to spend eternity crying about what was enforced on us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mr. Lindesay, Dunstan Conscience Lindesay, thank you very much for taking the time. I thoroughly enjoyed that. I really
And
did.
I did myself, Mike. And thank you. And Montserrat, thank you.